Okay, welcome everybody to the UpLift wheelchair event. I'm being ably assisted in the background by Kath and Kyle from the UpLift team, so thank you to them. We've got quite a packed schedule, so I think we'll crack on and get started. So if I could have the first slide, please. If anybody has any issues, just pop them in the chat and we'll get going. So, first, next slide, please. So, I'm your host for the event. Most of you will probably know who I am, but just in case, I'm the Chair of Trustees at Pathfinders, and today I am taking charge of this event. They've let me loose, so hopefully it'll be an informative hour and you will learn things and hear from other people. We've got some brilliant speakers and we've also got some people that have contributed that can't be here tonight, but they've done their bit nonetheless. Okay, next slide, please. So we're going to divide the session into 3 sections. We're going to cover makes, models and designs. Then we'll move on to look at the various funding options for wheelchairs. And then you'll be hearing from me about the referral process and assessments. And I'll share my story with you. And hopefully there'll be time left at the end for any questions. Next slide, please. So I'm going to introduce you to our guest speakers tonight. We've got Lizzie Bailey and Bobby Shearer, who are going to be telling us about their chairs and all about their functions and specifications and just how they make their chairs work for them. We are also joined by Neeru from Games UK and Kali Allen, who will be talking about the Smart Moves fund, which is linked to Games UK as well. So we'll be hearing from them later. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'd like to introduce Lizzie. Hopefully she'll be able to access the camera and the microphone. Lizzie, can you hear us? Lizzie, if you could indicate in the chat if you're having problems or say hello.
I'm okay. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Brilliant.
Excellent.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to you to introduce yourself and then I'm going to ask you a few questions.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name's Lizzie and I have congenital muscular dystrophy and I've used an electric wheelchair since the age of 2, and my current wheelchair is a Permobil F5 Corpus with front wheel drive, and I've had it since 2016.
Excellent, thank you. So you can see on the slide there's a fab picture of Lizzie receiving her award last year?
Last September, yeah.
Yeah, Princess from Princess Anne.
Yeah.
So, how could you tell us how you started the whole process of getting a wheelchair?
Yeah, my Permobil that I had before this one, I had for 17 years, and that was partly funded by ourselves and partly through army fundraising. My dad was in the army, and that was raised for us. So in 2016, my previous Permobil, which was called the Permobil Chairman, started going a bit crazy and having all sorts of things going wrong with it. And because it was 17 years old, it wasn't able to have bits and pieces repaired as well as they were previously. And it was harder to get the parts. So I decided it was time to upgrade. And I went to a wheelchair roadshow, Kids to Adult South, where I saw the new models of Permobil, and I got to try one out at the roadshow, and immediately said, "This is what I want." Just before that, I had needed a new wheelchair belt for my previous Permobil, and I went to wheelchair services because my physio told me that they should be able to supply it. And in order to have a wheelchair belt, I had to go through a whole meeting with a lady from wheelchair services just to prove why I actually needed a belt, which was a bit ridiculous when I'd had a wheelchair for my whole life. So she finally agreed that they would give me the belt for the old Permobil. But at the same time, I was talking to her about the fact that I wanted to upgrade anyway. So while I was going through the process of looking at Permobils, I was also in the process of going to wheelchair services to see whether they could provide me with a chair without me having to buy one for myself. So I had to go to the wheelchair services clinic at our local hospital, and in order for them to even start the process of them looking at providing me with an electric wheelchair, I had to go and do a driving test for them. But because I had seating needs, I couldn't actually do the driving test in the wheelchair they wanted to provide me with. So I had to do the driving test in my old Permobil, and I'd been driving a wheelchair since I was 2, so it seemed completely ridiculous to me to do this test. And part of this test was I had to drive from the hospital about a mile along a pavement to the local Tesco's, and I had to cross over 2 or 3 quite busy crossings, and my physio accompanied me, and at one of the crossings she told me that it was safe to cross, and the wheelchair services lady said that that was cheating because I was supposed to be able to do it by myself. When I would never actually go out and cross a busy road like that on my own anyway. And when we got into Tesco's, she wanted to watch me drive down one aisle and up another aisle just to prove that I could actually drive a wheelchair safely.
Goodness me.
So that was all so that she could tick a box and say that I could drive a wheelchair and that wheelchair services could actually provide me with a wheelchair. And they then brought the wheelchair they wanted me to have to, I said it was fine for me to drive it in a hospital corridor, but they had to bring it out to me here so I could test drive it. And that was a mid-wheel drive, and because I live on a small holding with lots of grass and uneven terrain, I wanted to test this out. And within 30 seconds, one of the front wheels had got stuck in a rut. So immediately I said, I can't have this chair. So I said, I'm going to go for the Permobile. So that was how I sort of crossed wheelchair services off and not provide me with what I needed.
So what were the must-haves for you? I know you said about the uneven terrain. Were there other functions?
Yeah, I needed the uneven terrain. That was one of the main things that I wanted. I wanted a good speed. I wanted to be able to rise the seat up to standing height, lie back, completely recline, backrest, and seat elevation. And I had all these functions on the previous Permobile. So when I had this meeting, the initial meeting with the lady from wheelchair services, and she said, "What functions do you want on your wheelchair?" I said, "I want to be able to rise so that I can talk to people standing up." And she actually said, "I don't think that's a reason that will pass the panel."
Yeah. So I think you're one of many who have had, let's say, interesting experiences with wheelchair services.
Yeah. So I carried on with my fun. So I talked to my cousin, who's a physio, and said that I'd seen the Permobile F5 at the roadshow, and that wheelchair services were not going to provide me with what I needed. So she said, "We'll set up a crowdfunding page." And within 3 months, we managed to raise most of the money through the crowdfunding page. But we also I got a grant from the Joseph Patrick Trust. And then the wheelchair services gave me a voucher towards the Permobile, but the voucher was the amount that they would have had to have spent to put the additional functions onto the chair that they were going to provide me with. So the chair that they would have provided me with was quite an expensive chair, but they didn't give me the cost of the actual chair.
Okay. So
they gave me the cost of what it would have cost then to add the seat elevation and the seat riser.
I see. So it was a combination of different sources for the funding.
Yeah, the main one was the crowdfunding.
Yeah. So it's a shame we can't talk to you, for the rest of the session. But what is your favourite thing on your chair and why?
My main favourite thing is the seat riser, as you can see from the photo. When I went to receive my MBE from Princess Anne, I was able to rise to almost the same height as her, and I love that because I can talk to people at eye level without having to strain my neck, and if they're sitting down, then I can be down at seat level as well. So that's great, and I also love that I can drive really fast on smooth tarmac and AstroTurf, but also faster than most people can walk.
Yeah, you're a lot faster than me.
Yeah.
I met up with Lizzie a few weeks ago, and yeah, I stand no chance.
That was a great service.
Yeah. Well,
Brilliant.
thank you so much for joining us. And please
Thanks.
do stick around and
Well,
hear the rest, and join in with the questions. Thank
thanks
you
for
so
having me.
much. You're
Thank you.
welcome. Mm. Okay, so moving on, I now have the pleasure of introducing you to Bobby Shearer. But we could have the next slide, please. Mm. Bobby, can you hear us, see us, and let's see if we can hear you. You might need to share your mic and camera with us. Mm. Or if you want to put something in the chat to indicate that you can't get on. Oh, something's happening. Bobby, can you hear us? Can you hear me?
Oh,
Good. I think we have. Yep. Can you hear me? Can you just say hello so I can check that you're with us?
just trying to connect.
Okay.
Are we on now?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Can we see Bobby? It looks like we can. Okay. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah.
We've got your photo and your chair details, but I'm going to hand over to you now. And if you could tell us a bit about your chair, how you came to have it, and the particular functions that you have.
Yeah. So, can anybody see? Oh, there we go. All right. Yeah, so I have a Invoker TDX 2. It's a mid-wheel drive. And I have a tilt, recline, and a trim control function on it. Well, Lizzie was saying about how long she's had a chair for. I've had quite a few chairs over the last few years. But I've had the current one for about 6 years. And most of the time, I've had NHS funding. There was one power chair I had when I was at school that was funded by WizKids. But since then, I've had an NHS chair ever since. Yeah. Like I say, I have this trim control, which doesn't seem to be working right now. Yeah. So that's basically my story with this chair, how I got it.
So how did you find the transition to the chin control? Because what sort of control did you have previously?
I had a hand control before, then I moved on to this trim control. I've had this for 2 years now, and it was quite a learning curve to be able to drive this with your chin. It just takes some getting used to.
I can imagine it does. Yeah, I'm not sure I'd be so confident with that. So did you have to go through a number of assessments in order to get the chair?
I think I just said to him that I was struggling to use my hand because it's starting to go cold and I was starting to lose function and being able to push it. So then they just got the ball rolling and they said, right, we'll try with the chin control. I think it took a few months in all to order it and get all set up onto my chair.
And am I right in thinking that this was provided via wheelchair services?
It was, yeah, wheelchair services.
And so does that mean that they are responsible for servicing and repairs? How often does it get serviced?
Yeah, it's they've not had to do anything to it as yet. There's a couple of parts that have worn away that they've booked for replacing.
And is it a case
Yeah,
that you contact them and they come out? I mean, I don't know. I have an annual service as well as being able to call if there are any problems. Is that the same for you?
I have had people come out and they've never seen the chin control before. It's hard when wasting time and sending them because when they come, oh, you see me with the chin control. Oh, what's this? I was expecting to fix hand control. No, just the end of this is fallen off. You need to replace it. So yeah, there is that. They don't always know what.
Usual communication issues.
Sometimes. Yeah.
Brilliant. So, what is your favourite function or adaptation on your chair, and why is that?
It's a chin control. I like it. That is a different way of driving a wheelchair. It's kind of a fun challenge to be able to push it with your face. And it also is connected to my laptop and my phone, which is what I was doing just now, which also helps with keeping independent.
Yeah, that's the crucial thing, isn't it? It's about independence, and also that we have the comfort, the postural needs are addressed. You know, all these elements make such a difference. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Bobby. And if you would like to stick around, and maybe people will have questions at the end. Is there anything else you'd like to
add? Just a quick tip actually. If you're at a wheelchair appointment, it's helpful to take a list for them to check off in case you forget things. That's what I did last week, and it was a lot easier to get across what I wanted to say. Although I did miss out a couple of points in my own list, but that's for another story. But yeah, it's helpful to take a list.
I think that's a really good tip. Because like you said, there's so much to remember, and especially if you are a little bit uncomfortable or you're being moved around or being asked to do things, it's very easy to miss points that you want to make. That's a good tip to end with. Thank you, Bobby. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next section of the event, which will be about funding. If I could have the next slide, please. So I thought I'd start with just talking through the summary of different options, and some of them we're going to be talking about in more detail, and some we've got our guest speakers who are going to present. So we have wheelchair services, which is probably the most known option for wheelchair provision. There are also a number of grants available, one being through the Joseph Patrick Trust, There's also Smart Moves, which is linked to SMA UK. Some of you might be aware that there's a Motability option. All of these have pros and cons, which we'll discuss in a little while. Motability, as well as being able to hire vehicles, you can do the same for powerchairs and scooters. There's also the Access to Work scheme, and we've got a video from Jamie coming up, and also some top tips from one of our members, Fee. And then, as Lizzie was mentioning, there's a fundraising option for funding things yourself. Okay, could we have the next slide, please? So I've started with NHS wheelchair services because that's the route that I took to get my wheelchairs. And things changed just before COVID started, and I know this because I was asked by my local wheelchair service to be on their focus group, and I got the great job of reviewing all their leaflets and tried to get my head around what a personal wheelchair budget actually was. But back in December 2019, the offer of a personal wheelchair budget became a right to have. It requires a referral from a healthcare professional if you're new to the service, and as Kath reminded me the other day, it's also the case if you are transitioning from a manual to a power chair, you would need a referral. The assessment and clinical decision is made according to eligibility, and the advantage of the personal wheelchair budget scheme is that it enables individuals to take advantage of other funding sources as well as the wheelchair service funding. It is advisable to contact your local wheelchair service because I know that it can depend on which area you're in. There may be regional differences. Next slide, please. Okay, so there are different ways in which the NHS wheelchair service can contribute. Firstly, there's something called the No Straw NHS PWB, and that comes from their NHS range, as long as it meets your need. So that is free, it's no cost to you. But the chair is the property of the wheelchair service. They carry out maintenance and repairs, so that again, that's at no cost to you. The second option is called a no straw top-up PWB, and that's a chair provided by the service, but you are able to choose additional features that you pay for. Again, the chair is the property of the wheelchair service. They carry out maintenance and repairs, but you would be liable for those additional features when they need replacing. There's also a notional, can't say that word, notional alternative PWB, which you can upgrade to an alternative within the NHS range, but you have to cover the difference. So I guess they would provide the one that meets your needs, but if you wanted to upgrade, then you could, but you pay the extra. Or there's something called a third party PWB, which enables you to choose a model outside of the range, but I think they provide some sort of voucher. You pay the difference, but then you pay all the repair costs. But the difference with the other options is that you own the chair at the end of it. Hopefully that's all present and is all correct at the time of the event, but it is always worth checking out on their website or by contacting wheelchair services. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to move on to hear from Neru from the UK, and she's going to tell us about a particular trust fund available and how that all works. So, welcome, Neru, and if you'd like to introduce yourself, and I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Sarah, and thank you all for being here this evening. So I'm Neru, and I am going to talk about how Muscular Dystrophy UK are here for you to provide, we believe, life-changing support, because when you've got the right wheelchair, it makes such a big difference to your quality of life. And our grants are open to anyone living with a neuromuscular or related condition, whether it's a muscular dystrophy or another neuromuscular condition. Can I have the next slide, please? So we have what's called the Joseph Patrick Trust. You'll hear it called JPT, and it's the welfare giving arm of MDUK. So we provide grants for the cost of essential powered mobility equipment. I'll go through what that includes in a moment, but we part fund mostly. Sometimes we do fully fund if the piece of equipment is within our tariff range. And JPT is a non-means tested grant. There's no age restriction, and it's open to anyone living with a muscular dystrophy or, as I said, an associated neuromuscular condition. And for equipment we're unable to provide funding for, we'll support with signposting to other organisations, and they may be able to provide the remainder of the funding. And I know Ali's here today from Smart Moves, so we work quite closely with Smart Moves because they have quite a big fund pot for those living with SMA. So if you are interested in applying for a grant, just email the JPT grants at musculardystrophyuk.org, and then Dimple, who works on our grants program, will be able to support you. Can I have the next slide, please? So in terms of the sorts of equipment we fund, so we fund power wheelchairs. It's up to £2,500. We fund manual wheelchairs, mobility scooters. We also fund some powered wheelchair adaptations. We do get quite a few requests for those. They cost a bit less, but it just means if you have got extra adaptation that you need for your wheelchair, we can provide that. We also provide power assist wheelchair adaptations. So sometimes you can actually convert manual wheelchairs to powered wheelchairs, so we provide that. Something new we've added over the last couple of years back into our tariff is mobile arm supports, and we do get some applications for those. So we fund single ones or double ones. And I think you've talked about the NHS and NHS wheelchair funding. It is sometimes a bit of a postcode lottery in terms of what's available for you. So this complements what you sometimes won't always get on the NHS, or you may be after a particular chair that's molded in a particular way that the NHS won't provide. But then we heard from the speakers earlier that they've got some joint funding from an NHS voucher and from the Joseph Patrick Trust, so we can add the extra onto that. The extra thing which we think is really important that we've added into our tariff over the last year and a half are risers, because what we find is the NHS don't fund risers. So what we do is we fund up to £2,500 for a riser, which adapts a chair so you're on a level playing field with people you're speaking to, and you can move up and down and do all the things that you want to do independently. So that's something new we've added to the tariff. It doesn't always cost £2,500. We've found risers ranging from £500 to 2,500. But I think it is just a good extra that the NHS won't fund. So we do fund that. The only thing the Joseph Patrick Trust don't do is we will part fund equipment or fully fund equipment. We don't provide any maintenance or upkeep costs for the equipment. So that needs to come from the provider that you actually get the piece of equipment from. Can I have the next slide, please? And then recently we've been collaborating with other organisations because I think the grants that we fund are vital and make such a difference, but they're sometimes a drop in the ocean when you've got wheelchairs costing up to 20, 25, 30,000 pounds. So we've been working quite closely with Smart Moves. I know Ali will speak in a moment, so I won't go into much detail on that. But what we do is we signpost and refer people back and forth. So we sometimes get people living with SMA that would come to us directly first. We would then signpost out to Ali and Smart Moves through SMA UK. And they normally, what they do, they've got a fantastic fund pot of they will spend the remainder of the cost of the wheelchair usually. But I won't go into any more detail because I'll be able to talk about that. We've also been working with a company called Designability, and Designability provides you a Wizzy Bug is for overtime as well if you're not over a weight threshold. So Designability are fantastic. They're fantastic organisation. They will come out, do the assessments, they will deliver a Wizzy Bug to you. They will collect them once they are too small and usable. So that's a great organisation to work quite closely. So that's good. The new organisation that I haven't included on this slide because we're just finalising things at the moment is working with WizKids, because WizKids provide paediatric wheelchairs.
Can I just interrupt? Sorry, Nuru. There is a really bad crackle, so we can't hear you anymore.
Is that better?
Yeah,
No?
really.
Let me check my mic seems to be fine. Let me go and check my settings. Just give me one moment. Okay, it looks like the mic is going up and down. Let me also plug in my laptop. That may help as well. Let me just do that 1 second. Okay. Right, is that any better?
Yes, that's much better.
That's much better. Okay, do you want me to start on this slide again?
Sorry, the sound's got again. I'm not sure what we can do about that.
Okay, so
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Nuru. Every time you start speaking, we can't hear anything.
I've just muted you because we're getting a lot of feedback. If there's anything you want to add, Nero, if you could stick it into the chat and then Sarah can read it.
Well, that's such a shame. But with them, I mean, you provided us with so much information there. Really useful stuff. So thank you for coming along. Please do stick around. We can maybe have some questions at the end. We can move the slides up, Kath. And we will move on to Ali, who is joining us from SMA UK. Welcome, Ali, and I will hand over to you. Tell us a bit more about Smart Moves.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me. So Smart Moves is part of SMA UK. It's a new grant scheme. Like Nora said, we work with Joseph Patrick. We are just for SMA families. So the Motability Foundation has helped with this grant and enables me to have 3 grants available for yourselves. It's not means tested, and it's any age can apply to Smart Moves. We have 3 pots. Like I said, I've got some information that Sarah will pass around later. Smart Moves 1.1 will help you with manual wheelchairs, power chairs that cost under £5,000. We can help you with a grant towards that. We have Smart Moves 1.2, which is any power chair, manual chair over £5,000. And then we have the Smart Moves 2 pot, which is for equipment. So anything, batteries, risers, wheels, joysticks, headrest, seating, anything up to £2,500 we can give you for that as well. When applying to Smart Moves, you only need 3 documents. I've only got 3 criteria that I need to tick. Your diagnosis letter of SMA, supporting letter from your physio or OT. That's really crucial that they have assessed you in your piece of equipment and that they're happy that it meets all of your needs for you to have that chair. And then the quote from the supplier. I pay the suppliers directly. I don't pay individuals. I pay the suppliers directly. And like mentioned with wheelchair services and how they don't really pay the risers. I can pay the risers, but again, I have to pay the suppliers directly, not wheelchair services, because they're a statutory body. So it has to be the suppliers. With the supporting letters, I know that it's quite difficult sometimes with adults. When you get into adult services, you kind of drop off the radar, which I don't really understand how that happens, because, you know, you still need your support. So I've got a small pot of private OTs that I can access for you to come out and see you with your equipment, with your supplier, and they can provide us with that supporting letter. Again, through SMA UK, we have got a couple of other little pots that we can help towards the cost of a private OT as well, with things called flexi grants as well. So there's some options there, you know, to help our adults, because like everybody knows, charities for support for adults is quite difficult. There's not many out there. But once you come into Smart Moves, I will help you all the way along. I will apply to third parties on your behalf. Like Nuru said, I work closely with Dimple. So we help refer each other to everybody. And then I can reach out to other charities such as Florence Nightingale and things, and I will do that on your behalf as your support worker for that.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. Thank you. That is quite must be quite a relief to have somebody like you dealing with all those bits of paperwork and all the stresses, because it's stressful stuff.
It's really stressful. It's really stressful. My background is I'm an SMA mummy. So, you know, when you come through to me, I know the battles that everybody goes through, you know, trying to apply to different charities, remembering who you've applied to. You know, I turn into a bit of a stalker, because if they haven't replied to my emails, I chase them and say, look, I've put an application in. Can you get back to me? You know, the pieces of kit, they cost so much money, and it's such a lot of stress for everybody. So if I can take that away from you and do that on your behalf, then, you know, that's what I'm here for. So always drop me a line and I'll do what I can to help you.
Fantastic. I'm sure that will be of interest to a lot of members. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Please stick around if you can.
I will.
Okay. Thank you, Ali.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Just going to run through the Motability, just some brief information, because we can't cover everything in this session. So Motability is an option. I looked at the eligibility, and if you were in receipt of PIP or DLA, high mobility rates, and in Scotland that's KDP, enhanced mobility rates, you would be able to hire a chair in the same way that you would a vehicle. So they would provide standard power chairs, but also configurable ones, which are more complex, have more additional features, and I think that should say that's a typo on my part. Advanced seating options. Benefits to the scheme is that they range insurance and like NHS service and maintenance is down to them and breakdown recovery. If you want to find any more details, I think we can provide that either in the chat or afterwards, but you can go on their website and find out a bit more about that option if that suits your needs. Okay, let's move on. Before I do, actually, this is Jamie. We're going to move on to access to work. Jamie kindly agreed to record a video for us as they couldn't be here at the actual event. So I think as soon as you move on the slide, it will start the video. So I'll hand over to Jamie.
Hi, it's Jamie. I said that I would talk briefly about getting your wheelchair funded through Access to Work. So I have 2 electric wheelchairs. One of them was funded by Wheelchair Services and is owned and maintained by them. And the other one was partially funded by Access to Work, which is a government scheme that helps pay for the costs of support and equipment that disabled people need in order to work. Things may have changed slightly in the past couple of years, but I don't think they've changed that much. So this was the process for getting a wheelchair. Access to Work won't pay for a wheelchair just because you need one. They see that as the job of the NHS. However, they will pay towards the cost of a wheelchair that you need specifically for work. So when you're thinking about that, you might need a standing wheelchair so that you can give talks and speeches and network, or you might need a small, more maneuverable wheelchair so you can get through narrow corridors around your building. You might need a larger off-road wheelchair if you need to be able to cover difficult terrain at work, or you might need a power assist for a manual wheelchair if your job needs you to be able to go further than you can self-propel. So those are the kinds of situations in which they might fund a wheelchair, and they'll only fund this if the NHS won't fund your chair, and they will only fund it for the proportion of your working week as to the whole week. So if you work 3 days a week, they'll fund 3/7 of it. Access to Work prefers a process where you get Wheelchair Services to give you a personal wheelchair budget, along with a letter that says that they cannot provide the chair you need. The reason Access to Work prefer this is because your personal wheelchair budget then contributes to the cost of the chair, which reduces the cost Access to Work has to pay. However, if you can't get a personal wheelchair budget, for example, because you recently got a chair from Wheelchair Services, which was my situation, they can sometimes also proceed without your personal wheelchair budget, as long as you have the letter saying that Wheelchair Services can't provide the chair you need. As I mentioned, Access to Work pays a proportion of the cost. So if you work for 5 days a week, they'll pay 5/7 of it. But if you only work 2 days a week, they'll pay 2/7. The rest is known as the social and domestic contribution, and Access to Work expect you to pay that. However, even if you already have a Motability car, Motability is sometimes able to cover the remaining proportion with a grant, which is what they did for me, so I didn't have to pay towards it. Overall, it was a great scheme that let me get a fantastic chair to do what I needed it to do. However, Access to Work can be very funny about funding ongoing costs like insurance, maintenance, and repairs. So before you sign anything, make sure you've discussed it with them and budgeted for it. Because typically, if Wheelchair Services give you a personal wheelchair budget that you use to buy a chair privately, they also won't fund the cost of maintenance and repairs. Access to Work will also want you to get 3 quotes for a large purchase. I was able to get away with only needing 2 because there were only 2 dealers able to quote for my chair in the UK, but Access to Work may require you to get quotes from multiple dealers before approving it. It's also worth saying that your Access to Work grant will be capped at a certain amount per year. I think it's currently in the 60,000s, and that covers support, equipment, and everything. So if you have a high support cost through them, you may not be able to get a wheelchair. Or similarly, if your wheelchair is expensive, this may limit the funding they can pay for your support. It also took me about a year from starting with Access to Work to even ordering the chair, with lots of delays to get paperwork from wheelchair services, quotes from dealers, and more. So be prepared for a long wait. However, overall, it's fantastic, and I really recommend it.
That's brilliant. And I think that demonstrates how important it is to hear from people that have been through this process already. And it shows how the different funding options can work in combination with each other. So thank you to Jamie. Can we have the next slide? We have a contribution from another member about her experience of access to work. And she's given us some top tips, which I'll just go through. So, when considering chairs, think about your whole life, not just the workplace. And I guess that applies to if you don't have a power chair already, get another one at home. Consider whether your chair would have a good turning circle in smaller toilets or smaller areas. Would you be able to get around your house? And some of the demo chairs that she tried didn't fit through the smaller door in their house. If you can, ask the demo, get home and at work. Think about weights. If it's something that you, say if you had to travel, would you be able to, would it be able to go with the hold on the airplane? Is it within regulations? Aim to be as neat as you can with the width, and then consider transportation. So, would it fit in your car, your wheelchair accessible vehicle? Will you need tie downs or a dock fitting? Factor all this in to your access to work request. Add the docking pin, for example, to the car for the car to the quote. So thank you to Fee for those tips. And I think that's the end of the funding section. We're getting through this, and the last bit is down to me. If we could move on to the next slide. So I thought I would just finish by telling you a bit about my current chairs. They're both being used at the moment, and I'll explain why. So back in 2011, I got the XDR2, which was as a result of I had previous wheelchairs that just weren't meeting my needs, mainly in terms of posture, and I'd gone back to using a manual chair which offered me very little support and not much independence either. So after a discussion with my neuromuscular physio at King's College, she sent a letter to my GP recommending that I be sent to could I ever get this the right way round? I think it's the Oxford Enablement Centre, or it could be the Enablement Centre at Oxford. I'm not sure, but you get the gist. Which took about 2.5 years of fighting for the funding, because wheelchair services wanted to deal with things in-house, and it was about persuading them that they didn't have the expertise or the previous attempts had gone wrong for me. So eventually we persuaded them, and the chair on the left is the one that I was they provided me with. And that's still going today. So what's that? 13 years old. It's still going strong. And it made such a difference to my life. Just being able to go out and move around on my own and in the car without having to be hoisted. You could imagine it was a revelation to me. And I didn't realise what I'd been missing for so long. So it was a big step. Then more recently, so last year, and I'll go into more detail in a minute, I was able to get a Dietz Slimline Sango, which is a chair that I'm able to use indoors, and it helps me be more functional around the house. Basically, it helps me get out of my room. I was stuck in one room if I wanted to do anything like be on my laptop, and it came out of an issue I had with pressure sore. And I think my physio might even be here tonight. She referred me to the joint community rehab team, which then kicked off more conversations and started the process to getting me a different chair to enable me to be more independent at home. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So carrying on from the chair I was just talking about. So I started with the joint community rehab team, and they met with me, and I was lucky enough to be introduced to a specialist physio who had expertise in posture. I had previously worked with her when she was at the wheelchair service, so it was nice to cross paths with her again, but I found that she immediately got the issues I was talking about, and the first meeting was just 2 hours of talking about what was important to me, what I had difficulties with, what I wanted to get out of the whole chair process, and that really provided the foundations for the rest of the journey. They captured all the essential bits and then worked out a plan. So the next step were a series of home visits. It was a collaborative effort, as was the previous chair. Different healthcare professionals, physio, and the seating company, the specialists, engineers. So this was all done in my own home. The difference with the other chair was that it wasn't funded via a personal wheelchair budget. It was instead funded by continuing healthcare, which can be a difficult one to argue for, but it was deemed a clinical need in that my scoliosis was worsening, and there was pressure sores, skin breakdown, and it was, a preventative measure. Things would have declined had I not had a suitable chair for in the house that allowed me to do what I wanted to do, to play with my nephews in the living room, do a puzzle, play a game on the table, rather than have to sit in my bedroom and use all sorts of different props and just improvising, basically. So after the funding was agreed, which wasn't easy, but we got there in the end, then the casting appointments were arranged. We had a mid-fit session where all the tweaks were identified that changes, a bit of remoulding, and then finally there was the handover appointment. If we could have the next slide, please. I thought I'd just show you a few different pictures of what the casting assessments involved in case you've never experienced this. So they basically made a mock-up of a chair, very basic base, just to give us a starting point. And it was sort of built around me. They used this special, it's a bit like a beanbag type thing behind me, and they tried to get all the supports in the right place to mimic what I would like to achieve with a seating system in a chair. And then they would take the air out so that it would harden. So the first and second pictures are me sitting on some sort of block with the casting bag around me, and then third picture, I'm out of the chair, looking back at what I've left behind, which is always a strange thing to see, because I don't feel that I look like that. And then the last picture gives you a clearer idea of what they then take away with them, and then they work on how best to recreate that. We could have the next slide, please. So to summarise, the chair is mid-wheel drive. There's a riser, which, as Lizzie said, was a revelation to me, because I could see in the cupboards that were higher than I could usually see it to. I could go quite low, so I could go close to my flowers outside. It tilts as well. And there's a centrally mounted joystick, which my other chair had too, because I've got very restricted arm movements, and my arm is pretty much set in one place. It also has independently adjustable foot plates, because I ended up with one foot higher than the other, which was brilliant. And they also built in a shelf at the back for my ventilator, and also, I don't know if you could see, top left, there is a battery as well, so my external battery. So they tried to think of everything with it. But because of my complex postural needs and the need for sort of to be as functional as possible at home, it's not safe enough to go in my car. So this chair is for in the house, and I still use the other one for going out and about because it's safer. Next slide, please. So I thought about some tips I could give, and one thing that the specialist physio said to me was to try and think of not just what I've been used to, or to just sort of get by, but think about what it was I really wanted to be able to do that maybe I hadn't before. So think about the possibilities. I opened my mind a little bit more to not just existing, but to be able to live with it, and do what I wanted to do. I think ask your peers about their experiences, as we tend to do in Pathfinders, is such a valuable thing to do. You learn about what works for other people, and also what doesn't work, because well, that can be also just as useful. It's important to tell the healthcare professionals involved about your needs, because as I mentioned before, the importance of that first conversation to set it all out. And I was very lucky to have some great people working with me who took the time to listen. That's what we want, really. Seating appointments, don't be afraid to ask for breaks when you need them. They are exhausting, and you know, breathing wise, energy wise, you need the toilet. You know, you just need to say, and also ensure about that you both understand the safety aspects of moving you around. And I tried to explain at the beginning that I would just say stop if something didn't feel right, and then we would, you know, pause, and rather than them thinking they knew what I needed. So just being clear, and also don't be afraid to chase things up when you don't hear anything for a while. So just some top tips that might help. I think that's the last slide on my story. If we could move on to the next one. Some reflections for after the hearing everybody today, and it occurred to me when I looked at my previous slides for the housing event I did last year that the same reflections could be applied to today. So I think Bobby mentioned this before, making lists of what you need. That's a really good place to start. Asking the difficult questions. That's something that Fleur always drilled into me. Don't be afraid to ask them. And talking to others about their experiences, which I think today has proved that that is a great place to start. If we could have the last slide. I think that brings us to the end. Hopefully I haven't waffled on for too long. Thank you so much for coming along. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you to all our guests and contributors. And do we have time for any questions, Kath?
Yeah, just a few. We've got time for just a few. And then I've got one last request as well before you go.
Okay. Do we have questions in the chat? Or can people speak? Oh, Joey has a question. What is the difference between a mid-wheel drive and a front-wheel drive? Do we have any volunteers to explain that?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
All I want to say, it's a great question.
Bobby, are you able to help out with that?
Yeah, so mid-wheel drive is where your driving wheels are in the middle of your chair, or the chassis of your chair. And the front wheel drive is where the driving wheels are at the front. You can also get rear wheel drive chairs. I believe Sarah says she had one of those, the XTR, rear wheel drive. So, yeah, it's where your driving wheels are positioned.
I guess it affects the drivability of the chair, what you would need it for. I think Lizzie mentioned that one didn't suit the bumpy terrain, got her small holding. So it's just something to consider when choosing your chair, and you would be able to get advice on that, I'm sure, from dealers or wheelchair services.
A really quick generalisation is that a mid-wheel drive chair is much more manoeuvrable in a tight space.
Yes.
On flat ground because it had small wheels at the front, and a front-wheel drive is much better to handle rougher terrain, but also curbs and things like that, but can sometimes have a bigger turning circle.
Yeah, I couldn't believe the difference with my new chair with the mid-wheel. I've never been able to turn so tightly. I can get into places in my house I didn't think I would be able to, so yeah.
I think it's important that, you know, if you're looking at at chairs, that you try a couple of the options to see what you feel comfortable with. I know when I was having reps out for my son, he had a rear wheel to start with, but when we tried him in a front wheel, he really didn't enjoy it. And he had a mid-wheel drive, and the turning circle is so small. He got on with the mid-wheel better. So if you are able to try both, then I would definitely see if that's an option for you.
I did have one thing that I forgot to mention before, and that was to do with getting the seating right, and that in both collaborations for the two chairs, there was that magic moment in both appointments where we just achieved it, and it took a long time to get to that point, but it was like a magic moment where suddenly everything felt how it should. My body was relaxed. My PA said they could see on my face the minute that we got there, and yeah, it does take a lot of effort sometimes, but it was well worth it.
Yeah, can I just add something there, Sarah? I just remembered that when I got my new Permobile, I was so excited on the first day, and when I got into it, I found it really difficult to drive because there was just something that didn't feel quite right, and I was so upset because I waited for this chair and everything like that. And then the next day, my cousin came down and said, I can't drive and I don't understand why. And she said, well, what's the problem? I said, I can't hold the joystick properly, the same as I was holding it. And she said, well, let's see what we can do. And she managed to actually remove the ball of my joystick from the old chair and fix it onto the new joystick on the new chair, and just that tiny little adaptation of the size of the ball of the joystick made such a difference between me feeling not in control and feeling in control. So that's quite an important thing to recognise, is that you can actually get a lot of different sizes and shapes of joystick, and it's worth talking to your wheelchair provider to see every option that's available to you.
This is so important to get it right. Given how much time a lot of us spend in our chairs,
Yeah,
it's quite a crucial thing.
yeah.
Thank you, Kath.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much for putting that all together.
I've
Really
enjoyed
useful.
it.